President Trump refiled his $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times yesterday. The suit also names Penguin Random House and 3 New York Times reporters. District Judge Stephen Merriday previously tossed the original complaint due to its length. The judge then gave Trump 28 days to amend the lawsuit. In the amended complaint, Trump accused the defendants of defamation over 2 articles and a book published last year ahead of the presidential election. The president alleged they contained statements intended to wrongfully defame and disparage his professional reputation. The lawsuit named New York Times reporters Susan Gregg, Russ Buechner, and Chief White House correspondent Peter Baker among the defendants. A New York Times spokesperson previously told the Epoch Times that the Trump's lawsuit has no merit. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, U.S. federal courts are being forced to send some employees home and require others to go without pay. This is due to the ongoing government shutdown. The federal judiciary was able to sustain paid operations for a few weeks by using fees and other funds independent of Congress approval. The funding is expected to run out today. As a result, furlough notices are expected to be sent out Monday morning. The last time this happened was during a government shutdown under President Bill Clinton. During the shutdown under President Trump's first term, the judiciary had enough available cash to last all 5 weeks. A similar financial fate is playing out for the Army Corps of Engineers. Office of Management and Budget Director Russ Vought said on X that the Corps is pausing more than $11 billion in lower priority projects. He said the Corps is unable to manage the projects because of the government shutdown. On top of that, he said the Corps is considering cancellation of some of those projects. They include projects in New York, San Francisco, Boston, and Baltimore. John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor turned adversary, pleaded not guilty today to 18 counts of illegally sharing and retaining classified information. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
One day after the Justice Department charged him with 18 counts, former National Security Advisor John Bolton pleaded not guilty in a court proceeding on Friday. A federal grand jury determined on Thursday that there was enough evidence presented by the Justice Department to bring criminal charges. The charges of unlawful handling of classified information are the result of an investigation that revealed Bolton had used a private AOL email to store and transmit classified notes during his 2018 to 2019 White House tenure in the first Trump administration. In August 2025, the FBI conducted a search on Bolton's Bethesda home and Washington office where agents seized devices and documents marked secret or confidential, including materials on weapons of mass destruction. The indictment states that Bolton shared more than 1,000 pages of information about his day-to-day activities as the National Security Advisor, including information relating to the national defense. It further states that this information was classified up to the top secret level. Bolton's attorney, Abby Lowell, told the Associated Press that keeping a diary is not a crime. He said Bolton kept personal diaries over his 45-year career, records that are unclassified, shared only with his immediate family and known to the FBI as far back as 2021. Bolton faces $250,000 in fines and 10 years in prison for each count. For now, he's not permitted to travel abroad without court approval. He has surrendered all of his travel documents, including his passport. The court is expected to hold a status hearing on November 21st. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Congressional Democrats are seeking to restrict the Trump administration's operations against foreign terrorist organizations led by the Venezuelan regime in the South Caribbean Sea. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more on the story.
Democrats in the House and the Senate have now submitted resolutions to stop the Trump administration from continuing strikes against foreign terrorist organizations smuggling drugs in the South Caribbean Sea.
Congress should be having hearings, literally right now. There's no reason we can't do it, and demand to know what the facts are, as well as also urging that the War Powers Act be implemented in those factual situations.
The White House has briefed the Armed Services and Intelligence Committee in both the House and the Senate on the strikes, but Democratic lawmakers who were not part of those classified briefings insist that they are illegal.
I rise today to denounce the Trump administration's reckless and illegal military escalation in the Caribbean. That is why I am introducing a resolution to terminate hostilities against Venezuela and against the transnational criminal organizations.
The government of the Dominican Republic has recovered thousands of kilos of cocaine from U.S.-destroyed vessels in the South Caribbean Sea. But Democratic lawmakers insist that the Trump administration needs to provide more evidence for the legality of these strikes.
Maduro is the head of the Cartel de los Soles. The Cartel de los Soles is responsible for the deaths of hundreds and tens of thousands of Americans. We need to protect the American people. These cartels are killing Americans every single day, and the number one job of government is to protect its citizens.
The U.S. has conducted a total of 6 strikes thus far, neutralizing 27 cartel members and stopping approximately 100,000 lethal doses of drugs from being smuggled into the U.S. Reports indicate that a strike conducted this Thursday left survivors that were recovered by U.S. military personnel.
The President of the United States is doing exactly what he should be doing. He's the commander-in-chief. When he sees an invasion coming against the United States, he takes action. He's a leader. He should take that action. I support him 100%.
The Senate will vote on a resolution submitted by Senator Tim Kaine to try and stop the Trump administration from continuing strikes against foreign terrorist organizations in the South Caribbean Sea. Similar legislation introduced in the House and the Senate in the past month have failed. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The first televised debate for the candidates to be mayor of New York took place last night. NTD's Daniel Monahan has key takeaways from the lively face-off between former Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani, and Republican Curtis Sliwa.
Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo took aim at Zohran Mamdani's experience.
I have the experience of having served in the New York State Assembly for 5 years and watching a broken political system, the experience of seeing a governor in Andrew Cuomo who would rather have served his billionaire donors and the working class New Yorkers who voted for him.
This is not a job for someone who has no management experience to run 300,000 people, no financial experience to run $115 billion budget. He literally has never had a job. On his resume, it says he interned for his mother.
Thank God I'm not a professional politician. We have the architect and we have the apprentice of no cash bail, which has been a disaster. We have the architect and the apprentice here of Raise the Age. My own son was almost killed because of that in a gang attack.
On failing to call for Hamas to lay down their arms, Mamdani said this.
Of course, I believe that they should lay down their arms. I'm proud to be one of the first elected officials in the state who called for a ceasefire. I'm hopeful that it is just. And for it to be just, we also have to ensure that it addresses the conditions that preceded this, conditions like occupation, like the siege, and apartheid.
The assemblyman will not denounce Hamas. The assemblyman will not denounce Hassan Piker, who said America deserved 9/11. The assemblyman just said in his response, well, it depends on occupation. That is code, meaning that Israel does not have a right to exist as a Jewish state.
The candidates also discussed the deployment of federal agents to handle crime.
When Donald Trump sent ICE agents on people in Los Angeles, Andrew Cuomo said that New Yorkers need not overreact. That is the furthest answer that New Yorkers are looking for.
I went through this with him. He sent the National Guard to 20 cities when I was governor. You know what city he didn't send them to? New York. Why? Because I said to him, don't you dare.
On protests, Sliwa says civil disobedience has its limits.
We have rampaging groups that go running through the streets, that enter all kinds of facilities and violate other people's rights. And there's no one who's willing to stop it.
On crime, the candidates had this to say.
We will have dedicated teams of mental health outreach workers in the top 100 subway stations with the highest levels of the mental health crisis and homelessness.
The NYPD is now down at one of the lowest levels in modern political history. I would add 5,000 police, put 1,500 in the subways.
The mayoral hopefuls also touched on the cost of living.
will freeze the rent for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants, and I will also build 200,000 truly affordable homes.
Freeze the rent only postpones the rent, because then you have to have an increase to cover the costs.
We have 6,000 available apartments that a mayor controls in NYC, and they've been empty for years. That you address, number one. Then we talk about senior citizens who are living here. My whole goal is to improve and not to move. I'm concerned about the seniors, especially those that own homes. If they're 65 and make less than $250,000, no property tax, because the property tax is way too high. We need to cut it in half to keep people who are here. And then in terms of rentals, we have affordable housing that can be built in these huge skyscrapers. You see them all throughout Manhattan and in northern Brooklyn and in Long Island City, which we have 25 Empire State Buildings full of commercial space that will never be occupied for office space. We should be converting them into affordable apartments.
And discuss the sex trade and its consequences on the streets.
Prosecuting women for prostitution is something that actually leads to less safety. And what we need to do is provide an economy of opportunity.
You don't go after the women. The women are the victims here. You lock up the Johns, you shame the Johns.
The election is now just 2 weeks away on November 4th. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And in New Jersey, the governor's race is tightening with less than 3 weeks until Election Day. A Fox News poll shows Democrat Mikey Sherrill leading Republican Jack Ciattarelli by just 5 points among likely voters. 50 to 45% down from an 8-point lead in late September. That puts the race within the margin of error. A separate Quinnipiac University poll released this week also shows a close contest, with Sherrill ahead 50 to 44%. Ciattarelli is outperforming among men, white voters, and those without college degrees, while Sherrill continues to lead with women, younger voters, and minorities. Both campaigns have ramped up attacks after 2 heated debates as enthusiasm remains high on both sides. Analysts say turnout could be the deciding factor when voters head to the polls on November 4th. And the federal government. Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani, Independent Andrew Cuomo, and Republican Curtis Sliwa faced off in the New York City Mayoral debate last night. Joining us to discuss is Robin Byro, Democratic strategist and former Obama regional campaign director. And we have public policy analyst and economist Michael Busler, professor of finance at Stockton University. Good afternoon, and thank you both for joining us. First of all, I want to start with you, Robin. How did this debate go, in your view? Did each candidate get an equal opportunity to make their points?
No, definitely not, because I felt that Sliwa was given not nearly the same amount of time as the other 2 candidates. In fact, the moderators spoke over him quite a bit. I've moderated probably a dozen debates, and they just weren't as skillful as I would have liked for them to have been, nor as fair. But they did, each one of them did manage to get out their platforms more or less. I would assert that Cuomo spent most of his time basically arguing against why people should not vote for the other 2 candidates rather than propose what his own platform was. But they did get their messages out there. It was just a really tough watch. 2 hours was a lot. Honestly, if I knew that I wasn't going to have to talk about this on television, I would have personally tuned out after maybe 15 minutes, to be completely honest. So I'm wondering how many Americans actually stayed for the full thing. Don?
All right, so Michael, can we get your thoughts on this as well? You heard what Robin said. What stood out to you? You can talk about fairness or anything else.
Yeah, I think Robin's assessment is fairly accurate. Maybe it's because Sliwa is doing so poorly in the polls that the moderator gave him much less time. It really looked like it was a debate between Mario Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani. They each tried to get their points out, but I thought Mamdani especially is a very skilled debater. And what happens is when they ask you a question that you really don't want to answer, you end up answering something else. So if they asked something about Gaza and Israel, he converted and said, well, the people of New York want this and the people of New York want that. So I think Mamdani was very skilled, and he's in the lead here. And when you're in the lead and you have a debate, you don't necessarily have to win. You just have to make sure you don't lose. And I think Mamdani was very skilled at doing that. And I don't see any big changes in the polls as a result of this debate.
So, Robin, what do you think? Is Mamdani a skilled debater? Who had the better performance?
Not only is a skilled debater, he came off as a slick, polished politician to me, Don. And that's the difference. The other two, Cuomo and Sliwa, both just seemed like New Yorkers, average New Yorkers you would meet on the street. They spoke like New Yorkers. They had concerns that I think would resonate with New Yorkers. Mamdani, he seems like he was not just speaking to issues that matter to New Yorkers, but maybe to a larger agenda when he leaves. If he were to win this, I think he's probably got his eyes on something bigger after this, because he was addressing concerns, a lot of concerns related to what he thinks of Donald Trump. And that really has very little to do with governing New York City right now. So, my assertion was that he's got his eyes on bigger sites, and he was preparing for that tonight. I think he was debating for a role in a larger role for later.
Okay, so Michael, what do you think about the candidates' performance? A similar question to you. Did any of the candidates' performances work against them, or did all of them perform up to what they could have potentially performed?
Well, I don't think Sliwa was given much of a chance, and I don't think he made any real points. Cuomo tried to attack Mamdani, but he is a very skilled debater. Plus, he seems like just a nice guy. He's young, he's fairly handsome, and I think he's very appealing to a lot of people. I don't think, and he didn't give a lot of specifics about his economic policies, which I think would be very bad for New York City. But he deflected questions away from that when he had to, and I think he ended up coming out fairly well in this.
So, Robin, what do you think about Mamdani's policies here? Are they any more clear now after this debate, whether it's free bus fares or freeze on rent?
Yeah, it wasn't particularly any more clear, except for on crime. I will say this. They each were asked a question on crime and what they would do. And to their credit, Sliwa and Cuomo specifically addressed the number of policemen that they would hire in addition. Sliwa said 7,000 more. Cuomo said, I believe, 5,000 more. Mamdani said none. He's talking about increasing for a Department of Public Safety in lieu of adding more policemen, which is going to feed into a narrative that he is anti-police, that he's defund the police. I heard both Cuomo and Sliwa say that he has said in 2020, you may recall, there were some tweets that Mamdani said back in 2020, 5 years ago, that were basically defund the police, and that's going to be really tough to get over. But somehow he's been dodging bullets. Mamdani's been dodging bullets on some of his prior comments that I would have thought would have ended his candidacy. But he did speak to some rent control issues. I just don't think that he was specific enough on those, but he did they all three got very specific on crime.
So, Michael, could you comment on the economic impact of Mamdani's policies? Some of them, for example, free bus service or the rent situation, a freeze on rent.
Yeah, so he's got three things I think that he's trying to sell to the citizens of New York. One, people are complaining grocery prices are too high. So he said, well, we'll just get rid of the bodegas and the independent grocery stores. We'll put in government-run grocery stores, and we'll make sure we hold the line on prices. He didn't explain too much about that, but something like that never works. Kansas City tried it, went on for a few years. They spent tens of millions of dollars, and it didn't work. The problem with the government-run store, so he didn't say this, but his view behind this is, look, if you have a government-run store, government doesn't have to make a profit. So if they don't have to make a profit, they can keep the cost down. Something costs 90 cents. A grocery store sells it for $1 because they want a profit. If the government does it, it's 90 cents. They don't have to make a profit, so they'll sell for 90 cents. It should be cheaper, is his logic. Why doesn't that work? Because you don't have to make a profit, there's no incentive to reduce the cost. business, you try to reduce the cost as much as possible because you're motivated by profit. In government, you don't try to reduce the cost because you're not motivated by profit. The result is that costs go up, and then they say, well, we're going to put a freeze on, we're going to hold the line. And then producers start saying, wait a minute, it costs me more to make it than I can sell it to you for. And what ends up having empty shelves. And it happens virtually every time. The free public transportation sounds like a great idea. We'll keep the cost down to free so people can get to work okay. The problem is when it becomes free, it gets overused. Someone says, look, I'm 8 blocks away. I normally walk that, but it doesn't cost anything to take the subway, so I'll take the subway. And you get more people using the subway. It gets overused, and it causes problems. Rent freezes, says, well, rents are going up, I'll just freeze them so they can't go any higher. The problem is the people that own the buildings, their costs go up. And when you can't raise the price, you can't raise the rent, it doesn't make sense to rent it anymore. So all his policies appeal to people and say, look, vote for me, you'll get the free rides on the bus, and you'll get lower rent, and you'll get lower groceries. It doesn't happen. There wasn't enough talk in the debate about that, and I think perhaps there should have been, so people can understand exactly how this works. As Margaret Thatcher says, socialism only works until you run out of somebody else's money.
Okay, so Robin, 2 things. Respond to what Michael is saying. If you have any response, I'd like to hear it.
Yes,
and,
I do.
And what do you think? Is there something that voters might have been looking for in that debate that didn't come out?
Yeah, and it's crazy to me, Don, that they didn't come out given the 2 hours that it drilled on for. But what I wanted to respond first to what Michael said. I found it rich that Mamdani wants to talk about freezing rents when he benefits right now from a rent-controlled apartment for which the rents are frozen for the last, I think, 8 years. And it was interesting to me also that we found out last night that he's paying $2,300 a month rent. I found it out of touch when Cuomo said that that's poor people's rent. I would assert that not that many poor people could even afford $2,300 a month. But the fact that Mamdani wants rents frozen when he's already benefited from rents being frozen for 8 years, I found hypocritical. and we can't freeze rents forever. Landlords need to be able to make a profit. That's just not how things work, nor should it. I'm in commercial real estate. I know what I'm talking about with that. Also, some of the things, the best line of the night that Mamdani landed was more of a national one. He said that the 8 most crime-infested cities were under Republican control right now, and why aren't we sending troops there? I've been saying that for months. Now, I will say one thing that I learned about all 3 of them last night, and the moderators did a good job here when they asked this question. They asked them each to raise their hand to see if they would cooperate with the Justice Department to send in troops to New York City. None of them raised their hands that they would cooperate with the Justice Department to send in troops when needed into New York City. I found that very interesting and telling. I think maybe the voters were looking for a difference, at least for one of the 3 of them possibly to raise their hand, that they might cooperate should there be a need in the future. Maybe there's not right now, but should there be a need, I would like to think that somebody would be cooperative with that.
All right, so Michael, if you have a response as well, I like to hear it. And how often do debates shift voter sentiment?
So they can shift it significantly. Recall the first Trump-Biden debate, and that obviously changed voter sentiment dramatically. In debates like this, I don't think it moves the needle very much. I looked at a few other debates, the governor of New Jersey, where I live, the governor race in Virginia. I don't think anybody landed any knockout blows. And I don't think in the New York City debate, there were any knockout blows landed. I don't think this is going to change what the polls are saying very much. And it looks like if all 3 candidates stay in the race, it looks like Mamdani is probably going to pull this out unless he shoots himself in the foot somewhere. And he's very intelligent, and he's very well spoken, and he's very personable. So as long as he sticks with that and he doesn't say something that will really hurt him, I think he's going to maintain that lead in the polls. As Robin pointed out, he's the only one that said, I'm not going to add any more police to the city. But he had an answer for that. And while a lot of us don't agree with that, he at least had an answer for that the people who support him said, well, maybe that's okay too. So even in the areas where he could have hurt himself, I don't think he did. And I think he's going to maintain the lead. And I don't think this debate did anything to change the standing in the polls.
Okay, Robin, I'll just end with you. If a undecided voter is watching this, which way would you think they would vote? And how do you like Mamdani's chances?
Well, now that depends. An undecided New York voter, I think, might be more influenced by Cuomo or Sliwa, for example, because honestly, like I said, they sounded more like New Yorkers. Personally, I did not like the fact that Mamdani sounded so much like a career politician, like a seasoned politician, somebody who's got a slick answer for everything. That's someone who I just generally don't trust. I just want to caution people that right now, at this stage of the campaign, I've run a lot of campaigns. I've had two that were about as well ahead as Mamdani is right now that absolutely tanked because of something that came out. One of those dark moments when the campaign surprises, the October surprises. So things could change, but I would agree with my esteemed colleague here that I think Mamdani's got it if there does not appear to be an October surprise.
Well, all right. Great conversation today. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Chicago police arrest several dozen people as protesters gathered outside an ICE facility today. The facility has been the focus of protests since an immigration enforcement surge began last month. Protesters initially chanted and held anti-ICE signs. ICE erected barriers outside the detention facility to keep the protesters at a safe distance. As police advanced, protesters began scuffling and shouting obscenities. Illinois state police officers made several arrests. People in the Chicago area have staged repeated protests against the stepped-up federal presence. In some cases, the protests became violent, with people attacking ICE facilities and agents. The country is bracing for nationwide No Kings protests on Saturday, which the organizer says will number in the thousands. Some elected officials are speaking in support of the protests, while others are expressing criticism. NTD's correspondent Jason Blair has more.
The organizer for the No Kings protest says that millions are expected to turn out on Saturday to over 2,600 events.
No Kings is back. And over the past few months, thousands of people have organized once again in their communities, on the ground locally, volunteering to bring their neighbors, families, and friends together to say unequivocally, we have no kings.
Epstein Ortiz is calling it the, quote, largest single-day protest in modern history. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries voices his approval.
I support the right of every single American to participate in the rallies that are going to take place this week. And showing up to express dissent against an out-of-control administration.
However, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson sees the rallies differently.
We refer to it by its more accurate description, the Hate America rally, okay? And I'm not sure how anybody can refute that.
And in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott announced on Thursday that he's deployed Texas National Guard into Austin ahead of what he calls, quote, Antifa-linked protests. Abbott says Texas will not tolerate chaos. Anyone destroying property or committing acts of violence will be swiftly arrested. Here in Washington, D.C., organizers are expecting over 100,000 people on Saturday. And large-scale Turning Point USA events continue to happen around the country. 6,000 people honored Charlie Kirk at an event on Thursday in Oklahoma. Speaking at the event were Russell Brand and the Oklahoma governor. And later this month on October 29th, Erica Kirk, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, will headline a Turning Point USA event at the University of Mississippi. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.